My husband turned our honeymoon into a boys' trip. Then I found out why his friend's wife wanted divorce. I still can't believe how quickly my marriage fell apart. What was supposed to be the beginning of our life together ended before it even properly started, all because of one thoughtless decision. My now ex-husband and I had been together for 5 years before we got married 2 months ago. We were both 29, had good jobs, and everything seemed perfect. We met through my college friend Sarah at a local coffee shop. He was charming, funny, and we clicked right away. After our first date, we became inseparable. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We had our share of arguments like any couple, but they were always about normal things like whose turn it was to do the dishes or what movie to watch. We had planned a beautiful 2-week vacation in Greece for our honeymoon. I had been dreaming about walking hand in hand through the ancient ruins, enjoying romantic dinners by the Mediterranean, and just having that special time together as newlyweds. We had spent months planning every detail, which islands to visit, which hotels to stay in, even which restaurants we wanted to try. I had bought new clothes, learned a few Greek phrases, and even started following some Greek cooking channels to prepare for our trip. But everything changed at the airport. Just half an hour before our flight, as we were sitting at the gate, my husband casually mentioned that his closest friend would be joining us after 2 days. Not as a passing visitor, but for the entire remainder of our honeymoon. I thought he was joking at first, but when I saw his expression, I realized he was serious. His friend had just found out his wife wanted a divorce. Apparently, she had told him right after our wedding that she wasn't happy anymore and had feelings for someone else. My husband explained that his friend was devastated and needed support, so he had already booked his tickets to join us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Without any discussion, without even asking me, he had invited someone to join us on our honeymoon. When I expressed my shock and anger, he actually had the nerve to say he hadn't told me earlier because he knew I would freak out like this. "We'll have 2 days to ourselves," he said, like that made everything okay. "He really needs this break. We need to be there for him. He's practically my brother. We grew up together." I was beyond furious. This wasn't just about the honeymoon anymore. It was about respect and trust. How could he make such a huge decision without even consulting me? How could he think it was okay to spring this on me at the last possible moment when I couldn't do anything about it? After a heated argument right there at the gate, I made my decision. I grabbed my bags, told him to enjoy his trip with his friend, and left. He tried to follow me, calling out that we could work something out, but I was done. I took the first taxi I could find and went straight to my parents' house. Over the next few days, he kept texting me about how he couldn't cancel because the bookings were non-refundable, and how he would plan another honeymoon just for us later. He actually went on the trip with his friend, which hurt even more. It showed me exactly where his priorities lay. My parents were supportive, but didn't push me in any direction. They said they would stand by whatever decision I made. My mom made sure I ate properly and gave me space when I needed it. My dad, who had always liked my husband, just looked disappointed but never said a word against him. My friends were split on the issue. Sarah, who had introduced us, thought I should try to work it out when he returned. 5 years is a long time, she said. Maybe he just made a stupid mistake trying to help his friend. But my best friend Rachel disagreed completely. If he's already making huge decisions without you now, imagine what he'll do later, she pointed out. What if it's about your future kids or where to live? His family was a different story. They started messaging me about how I was overreacting and needed to give him a chance to explain himself. According to them, while what he did wasn't right, ending a marriage over it was too extreme. His mother called me twice, crying about how we needed to work things out. His sister sent me long messages about forgiveness and understanding. Of course they would take his side, they always had. I spent the first few days just sitting in my old bedroom at my parents' house, staring at my phone. I kept hoping he would realize what he had done and come back. But instead, he posted pictures from Greece, him and his friend at the very restaurants we had planned to visit together, at the beaches where we were supposed to watch the sunset, at all the places that were meant for our memories. After a week of no real attempt from him to make things right, I contacted a lawyer. Some might think ending a marriage over a ruined honeymoon is extreme, but for me it wasn't about the honeymoon anymore. It was about the complete lack of respect for me and my feelings, the manipulation of telling me at the last minute, so I couldn't object, and the fact that he chose to prioritize his friend over our marriage from literally day one. The lawyer I consulted, an older woman named Ms. Thompson, listened to my story without judgment. She explained my options clearly and helped me understand what steps I needed to take. Since we had been married for such a short time, an annulment was possible. I moved my things out of our apartment while he was still away. Sarah offered to help, but I wanted to do it alone. Every photo I took down, every shared item I sorted through, felt like another step toward ending this chapter of my life. I left his things neatly organized and took only what was clearly mine. We had kept our finances separate throughout our relationship, which now seemed like a blessing. The only joint purchase we had made was our furniture, which I didn't want anyway. It would just remind me of everything we had planned together. My new apartment was small, but it was all mine. As I unpacked my boxes and tried to make it feel like home, I kept wondering if I was making the right decision. 5 years is a long time to throw away, but I knew I couldn't be with someone who would make such important decisions without me and then try to manipulate me into accepting them. The next few days were hard. I tried to keep myself busy with work, but my mind kept drifting to what he was doing in Greece. The pictures he posted online didn't help. Each one felt like a reminder of what our honeymoon should have been. I finally decided to block him on social media, just to stop myself from checking his updates every few hours. My parents noticed I wasn't eating properly and tried their best to help. Mom would bring me my favorite foods, and Dad started taking me on morning walks just to get me out of the house. My friends visited often, especially Rachel, who brought ice cream and sat with me while I cried. A week passed, and according to their original schedule, they were supposed to return tomorrow. The thought of seeing him again made my stomach turn. I had the annulment papers ready. Ms. Thompson had dropped them off yesterday. She told me to take my time reviewing them, but I had already made up my mind. That evening, I got a message from him on my work email, the only contact he had left. He asked if we could talk when he got back. I stared at that message for an hour before replying. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I knew we needed to talk at least once before ending things. I agreed to meet him at my parents' house the next evening. I didn't want to meet at our old apartment or in public. This conversation needed to be private, but somewhere I felt safe. When he arrived, he looked different somehow. Tanned from the Greek sun, yes, but also tired and unsure. Not like the confident person who had tried to convince me at the airport that his plan was perfectly fine. "I owe you an explanation," he said as soon as he sat down. "And an apology. What I did was wrong." I waited for him to continue, not trusting myself to speak yet. "There's something I haven't told you," he continued. "Something I should have told you before our wedding. That got my attention." What else had he been hiding? He took a deep breath and started explaining. The night before our wedding, his friend's wife had sent him a message. A long message confessing that she was in love with him, not her husband. She had been feeling this way for months, but never said anything. Seeing us prepare for our wedding had made her realize she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine in her marriage. I felt like someone had dumped cold water over me. "You knew about this before our wedding?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. "I didn't want to cause drama right before the wedding. I thought I could handle it quietly." "Handle it quietly?" I repeated, anger rising in my voice. "Your friend's wife confesses her love for you, and you decide to handle it quietly?" He explained how he had pulled her aside during our wedding reception and told her she needed to be honest with her husband. She didn't want to, saying that since he wasn't going to leave me for her anyway, there was no point in ruining her marriage. But he insisted that her husband deserved to know the truth. She finally told her husband right after our wedding. That's why he was so devastated, not just because his wife wanted a divorce, but because she was in love with his best friend. "So you invited him on our honeymoon out of guilt?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. "Yes," he admitted. "I felt responsible. I knew how much he loved her, and I thought if I could just be there for him." "But you weren't there for me," I cut in. "You kept all of this from me. You made a huge decision about our honeymoon without telling me. You chose him over me from the very start." "I know," he said quietly. "I messed up. I was trying so hard to fix things with him that I ended up breaking things with you." We sat in silence for a while. I had 1,000 questions, but didn't know where to start. "Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier?" I finally asked. "When she first messaged you, or after the wedding, or even at the airport. Why keep it secret?" I thought I could handle it without causing more drama. I'm not good with confrontations. I thought if I could just help him through this. "But I'm your wife," I said. "Or I was supposed to be. We were supposed to handle things together. That's what marriage is about." He looked at the floor. I know that now." I pulled out the annulment papers from my bag. "I appreciate you finally telling me the truth, but it's too late. You've shown me that you can't be honest with me, that you don't trust me enough to handle difficult situations together." "Do you still love me?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. Did I? After everything that had happened? "Yes," I admitted after a moment. "But love isn't enough. We need trust, respect, honesty, and you've broken all of those." His eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "I understand." We filled out the paperwork together. Neither of us spoke much. What was there left to say? When he stood up to leave, he paused at the door. "Your parents have always been good to me," he said. "Please tell them I'm sorry for hurting their daughter." I promised I would. Our last hug felt like goodbye to not just our marriage, but to our entire 5 years together. All our plans, our dreams, our inside jokes, everything was ending. As I watched him walk to his car, I remembered our first date, how we had talked for hours at that coffee shop, how certain I had been that he was the one. But people change, or maybe we just get to know who they really are. The man I fell in love with would have trusted me with the truth. He would have put our marriage first. This man, who had just walked away, was someone different. Someone who would keep secrets and make decisions without me. Someone who didn't understand that marriage meant facing problems together. That night, I cried harder than I had since this whole thing started. Not because I regretted my decision, but because it hurt to let go of someone I had loved for so long. My mom sat with me, stroking my hair like she used to when I was little, not saying anything, just being there. A year has passed since everything happened. Living alone was hard at first. I kept turning to tell him something funny, only to remember he wasn't there. But slowly, day by day, things got better. I focused on my work and got a promotion. I redecorated my apartment, joined a book club, and started taking cooking classes. My friends were amazing throughout everything. Rachel made sure I didn't spend too many weekends alone, and Sarah, despite feeling guilty about introducing us, became an even closer friend. I hadn't seen him for months after signing the papers. We lived in the same city, but managed to avoid each other completely. Then, about 3 months ago, we ran into each other at our friend Mike's wedding. I had been nervous about going to the wedding, knowing he would be there. I almost made up an excuse not to attend, but Rachel convinced me I couldn't avoid these situations forever. She was right, of course. When I first saw him across the room, my heart did a little jump. Old habits die hard, I guess. But as the evening went on, I realized something had changed. The sight of him didn't hurt anymore. It was more like seeing an old friend than the man who had broken my heart. During the reception, we ended up at the same table with some mutual friends. It was awkward at first, but after a few minutes, we managed to have a normal conversation. He told me he had quit his job at the accounting firm and started his own business, something he had always talked about but never had the courage to do before. "Remember how you used to push me to take that risk?" he said, smiling slightly. "Turns out you were right." I told him about my promotion and my new apartment. We even laughed about how we both still lived in the same neighborhood, just a few blocks apart, yet hadn't run into each other until now. Someone asked about his friend, and his smile faded a bit. He explained that they weren't friends anymore. After telling him the truth about his wife's feelings, his friend had cut all ties with him. So much for saving their friendship by taking him on our honeymoon. "I really messed everything up, didn't I?" he said quietly, when the others were busy dancing. "We both learned from it," I replied. "Sometimes things fall apart so better things can come together." He nodded. "I'm glad you're doing well. You deserve to be happy." The surprising thing was, I meant it when I said I was doing well. The pain that had seemed unbearable a year ago had faded into a dull ache, and even that was disappearing. I had learned a lot about myself through all of this, about what I wanted in a relationship, about my own strength, about the importance of having supportive friends and family. After the wedding, we started running into each other more often. Maybe we just stopped trying so hard to avoid each other. We'd wave hello at the local coffee shop or exchange quick updates when we saw each other at the grocery store. It wasn't exactly friendship, but it was peaceful. And that was more than I had expected a year ago. Last week, I ran into his sister at the mall. She hugged me and told me she missed having me in the family. It was nice to hear, but it also made me realize how far I'd come. A year ago, those words would have made me cry. Now they just brought back memories, some good, some bad, but all of them just memories. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he had been honest from the start. If he had told me about his friend's wife's confession before the wedding, or if he had discussed the honeymoon situation with me instead of making the decision alone. Maybe we could have handled it together. Maybe we would still be married. But then I remember something my mom told me during those difficult days after the airport incident. Sometimes the way someone handles a crisis shows you who they really are. His actions showed me that we had different ideas about what marriage meant. For me, it meant facing everything together, being honest even when it's difficult, making decisions as a team. For him, it meant trying to fix everything himself, keeping secrets to avoid confrontation, making decisions alone to avoid disagreement. Rachel thinks I should start dating again. She's probably right, I feel ready now. But I'm not in a hurry. This whole experience taught me that it's better to be alone than to be with someone who doesn't share your values about honesty and partnership. The other day, I found an old photo of us from our first vacation together. Looking at it didn't hurt like it used to. Instead, I felt grateful for the lessons I learned from our relationship and its end. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that it's okay to stand up for what you need in a relationship, and that sometimes love isn't enough if there isn't trust and respect to go with it. People often ask if I regret ending my marriage so quickly. I don't. When something's broken, it's broken, whether it's been a day or a decade. What happened at the airport was just a symptom of deeper problems. His inability to be honest with me, his tendency to make big decisions without me, his way of avoiding difficult conversations. These were all signs that we weren't ready for marriage, no matter how long we had been together. I'm not angry anymore. Not at him, not at his friend's wife, not even at the situation. Sometimes things don't work out the way we planned, and that's okay. What matters is what we learn from it and how we move forward. And I have moved forward. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm stronger, wiser, and more sure of what I want in life and in love. Maybe that's the silver lining in all of this. Sometimes it takes losing what you thought you wanted to find out what you really need.